Hi everyone. Well, I'm going to launch my candidacy for president out of desperation. So, I asked anybody out there, any Americans, pencil me in for President of the United States. Okay, well, let me explain to you first why I would be qualified, and second, why I'd be the best candidate for the job. My first qualification is I have no desire to be president. I've always said anybody who wants that job has to be crazy. That's how we maybe ended up where we are today. Believe me. Believe you me. I did not come back to Washington to get back into the game in 2009. I came back here to fight for my rights, which has ended up into fighting for everybody else's rights, women and children around the world, and trying to bring some democracy and sanity back into this town. I came back to this country and to Washington in 2009. And everybody was just rah, rah, rah. We have a black president. We're the greatest democracy in the world. I'm sorry. Obama sold the Americans out. He's just another black version of Trump. In bed with the corporate elite just as much as Michelle Obama. Why did Michelle Obama not pull a Nancy Reagan and just say no to the war on drugs and just say no to the new Jim Crow? So my first promise as president was I would dismantle all of that. It's been failed from the beginning. It's just a repeat of prohibition and all the preppies and yuppies and Debs, with my former classmate Cornelia Guest, Deb of the decade in the 1980s, the cheerleaders, and that they just are the exact same thing as the flappers. And I've been calling them out for over a decade, since I've been back, saying everybody needs to assume. Sean Penn understood the complicity of the golden age cocaine snorters of the 1980s and libertines who brought in just partying. I don't care if you're doing cocaine or wine and fine dining. It's all just partying and ignoring the needs of the people. Washington is no different than Berlin in the rise to power of the Third Reich, and in the United States we have the Fourth Reich. You can see I've done some presentations in the past month. Most of my stuff up to this point has been writings. But I have built my case against the American government to fulfill that promise, a case for the courts. I've been trying to get to the international courts now for 10 years, but nobody in the human rights community will go after the Americans or the Europeans. They're all focused on liberating the Muslim women in in Afghanistan and in the poor countries around the world, and are in bed with the alpha dominance feminists who are in bed with the domestic violence organizations, who is just a money-making industry. Everything, all the NGOs, all the think tanks in Washington need to be drained of all of the seat warmers and game players, just as Congress State Department, White House, DOJ, IMF, World Bank, United Nations, universities, and I have the names of everyone who is just sitting around, publishing their books, getting on podiums, giving speeches, and I want to see them in court. Why they are not taking any action. One of the big problems that the domestic violence people and the feminists have with me is that our great divide, if you will, is that I am not willing to say that domestic violence and promote that domestic violence is just, you know, the raping and murdering, beatings of women by men. Domestic violence is also the emotional and psychological abuse of women, and we're seeing it everywhere, in communities, in schools, in workplaces, in homes, and this is, you know, why nobody will give me a voice there, because I will not. My father was a victim, a horrible victim. My mother was the abuser in my family growing up. So I have seen it, you know, on both sides. So I know that is not true. And in fact, the UN report on in-depth study on all violence against women demonstrates that it is the women in societies that maintain the violence of men, which is 90%. The physical and sexual violence is perpetrated by men, but they maintain that through their norms, and this is the bullying and the harassment and the whoring of women, because women are also principals in the trafficking of women and children, and we see that all the time in the UN, you know, relief efforts. But this is also happening in Washington. I mean, Washington, it is just whoring and pimping everywhere you go. When I first arrived in 2009, the first headhunter that I met with, she said, "I'll never find you a job because anybody interviewing you will be afraid that in 6 months you will have their job." Now, I am qualified in, restaurant business, catering, entertaining, you know, reforming homes. I've offered to do that here, as well as my brilliance in international economics. No, I do not have a PhD, but in 1985, I did get a 98, which I still contend should have been a 99, at my international econ class at George Washington University in DC, in a course that I was told to drop because even the econ majors failed at least once. Now, it was the easiest course I ever took, and when everybody failed the midterm, anybody who asked me, I, you know, tutored them for the final. They all passed it with flying colors. Now, the only concern of that professor was, you know, offended and angry that I had caught him on it wasn't a mistake, if you will, in the construction of his sentence that he says I got wrong, I say I got right, but it was the adverbs and how it modified the verb. And I was right. And if anybody knows me out there, I'll never go. I don't care what grades I get. But if I deserve a point, I want a point. If you give me a C or a D and I deserve it, I'm not going to say boo. So, yes, I do not have a PhD. However, in the past, well, I started in Spain. This is where my problems with the courts came in, was my domestic violence divorce case in Spain where they defrauded all of my assets, took my children, and made me flee the country for my life in order to shut me up. And of course, my consulate there hung me out to dry, and this is where my focus has been in my activism work in the domestic violence, is trying to get the consulates to assume their responsibility in defending the rights of their citizens in foreign countries during judicial and extrajudicial proceedings. One of the cases that got a high profile was Amanda Knox. Ridiculous. Amanda's family should be suing the American government. There was a David Goldman, that was a custody case. That got a lot of media press, of course, because one of the congressmen, I forget which one it was involved in that. That was 2009 or so. But that's only if you get in the press and get somebody up on the Hill to see how to cash in on those cases, because normally the consulates, we don't get involved. Which they are violating their obligation under the U.S. Constitution, just as the federal government is violating its obligation to oversee the state governments in the United States and the problems within family courts there, as well as the penal systems and the entire judicial system. In fact, one of the problems Biden and Kamala Harris are going to have if they win the elections is that Carrie Bettinger Lopez, the advisor to violence against women at the White House under Biden, is in trouble in the international courts for getting in bed with the American government after the Gonzalez-Linehan versus USA case in the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Now, the American government claimed that they did not have jurisdiction and control over their courts at the state level and their judicial systems at the state level and local levels, and therefore could not assure the protection of women and children victims of domestic abuse. Now, that was 2011. I told all of the activists, I said, well, this is basically the American government negating their legitimacy under the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. If they don't have control over the state governments and courts, then why do they exist? That's their primary function, or one of their primary functions. Another is to coordinate when we have a global, a national pandemic or a global pandemic, coordinate. I mean, when this all finishes, this is getting into genocide now. I've been trying to bring the American government to court, to the international courts under Article 6 of the Rome Statutes, which is crimes against humanity for the violation of rights of women and children in family courts, as well as what's going on in the penal system and the civil courts. It's from top to bottom, and it needs to be cleaned up. So, why Carrie Bettinger Lopez didn't attack the American government and go back to the courts with other cases and other cases and other cases. Keep on saying, if you gotta fight somebody, ask any boxer out there or ask any general. You don't throw a punch and then walk away. unless you want them coming after you. Oh, she got in bed with the White House and played, oh, let's go to all of the cocktail parties. The last cocktail party I went for the domestic violence, National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They're the ones who organize most everything. I want to see them in the international courts as well under Article 6 of the Rome Statutes. Went to the cocktail party and I said, look, I'm done. If I want a glass of wine and some food, I can buy it myself. I'm not wasting any more time with you here. And I wasn't the only one. Believe me, there's a lot of women behind me. So, courts need to be cleaned up. And I'll be calling out a lot of my former classmates from Foxcroft. Cobham Hall as well. That gets into my international work. That was in England. One of my main objectives in coming up with my organization Global Expats, which is modeled after the Federation of American Women's Clubs overseas. However, I will refuse and will not get into bed with corporate greed and corporate America. They're just a smokescreen for that. And I want to see them in the international courts, along with the IMF Family Association, the World Bank, Family Network, UN Local Expat Spouse Association, the Fédération Internationale, l'Association des Francophones à l'étranger, FIAF. The Canadians got there. I mean, what are all of you, expat ladies doing? Hanging out at country clubs, going to parties, schmoozing and cruising with the diplomats and the corporate people you should be calling out, like I used to do, and I've been doing. So, the ruling elite women, I always say, you get to the wives and the mothers of the ruling elite men, that's where you make the change. There's a very good documentary, Who Rules America. I advise everybody to watch that. But think about it, that behind all of those men who are in power are their wives. And I can assure you, there was one story about some guy who Trump wanted him to come on his administration, and what prevented him was not any concern about any future legal problems, which should have been his main concern. It was that his wife would have made his life a living hell. And I can assure you, there are many, 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 many women in this town. Some I know personally. Some I know by my correspondence. Some I know by name. But they're all complicit. Now, they need to get out of their country clubs and their little coffee mornings and social climbing and either get to work or get out of the game. I'm not screwing around here. Emily Post did the same thing back in the 1920s with the flappers, and that's what needs to be done. Bring a little bit of etiquette and decorum and manners into the people of this town. It's the place where I'm living now. I've only been able to afford group homes because everybody loves to depose trophy wives and homemakers trying to get back into the workforce. Oh, ladies, as Erin Eddy said, I loved it. She said, you want to reclaim your rights in this country? Take that lemon for a drive. It ain't even getting off the curb. You can see my court watch in Arlington, Virginia, for poor Erin Eddy of the State Department. her husband is DOJ. The Judge Newman is married to Sheila Johnson, the first black billionaire who lives out in Middleburg, where Foxcroft is. See how the world is very, very small and very, very little cozy. Believe me. The ruling elite, who rules America? I have many names. And the books, I mean, you can see some of my books here. I've got hundreds of books. How is it possible all of academia, all of these journalists, everybody is producing the evidence, yet nobody will say, what? Wait a minute here. We're going to start holding you to account. All of you. And no, the Democrats are not going to take the lead there. Kamala Harris, ask any victim of the courts. The women judges, the women lawyers are the worst. And I am tired of the African American women in this country spitting on me, denigrating me. You can ask, I mean, I've known, you know, black people all over the world pretty much. And I mean, first off, never, you can ask anybody I've ever known in the world, never do I treat anyone with disrespect. I don't care how stupid they are. Well, I did call one of these stupid blonde women in one of the restaurants I worked at a bitch rather than slapping her, but somebody's got to start calling out these little millennials and ex-gens and this, you know, you mothers out there should take a look at what you've produced and what you've produced for this country. And read the Narcissist Epidemic book, Twang and Campbell, when the whole house of cards comes collapsing, because I'll get into Wall Street in a second. All of your little entitled kids, many of them which infect Washington and you run out of town, go and get a real job and an honest job instead of sleeping your way to the top. You know, all of you should be ashamed of yourselves. I mean, I want to see, this is another one I want to see, all of the alpha dominance feminists in power. Christine Lagarde, Carla Grasso, Sharmini Curry. Well, these are people at the IMF that I was working with. But then we got Hillary Clinton, Anne Marie Slaughter. Let's see, with the Americans, the list is so long. Those are two that really come to mind. Leslie Morgan Steiner. I want to see all of you feminists who know what are going on in the courts, yet you're too busy cashing in to care. And I want to see you prove how you can have it all. Because not only are you screwing up in the workplace, but you're screwing up your kids. And one of the things that I promised was that I would never repeat what my mother did to me. And my two Bibles, and I lived abroad, so I didn't have access to books in English. My two Bibles were Dr. Spock's, you know, baby child rearing, and Adele Davis. And we need to take a good look at how children are being brought up, not only emotionally within the homes, within the schools, and this gets to early childhood development, but also the crap that is being fed to everybody. and producing obesity and diabetes, and this is the food processed industry, the sugar industry. The sugar industry is the precursor to the drug addiction. So all of that needs to be, and we need education reform, and to get rid of all of the, all of this money going to a bunch of PhDs who never graduated from kindergarten. Excuse me, we need money into our early childhood education, primary and secondary. And yeah, we need college educated, populations. People are living longer, so of course our children can stay in school longer. That's fine. But not that they have some inflated ego just because they think that they, have some college education and all of a sudden they becomes God's gift to the world. Most of them don't understand a thing that they're talking about, and they don't understand how to apply it to the real world. They're up in their la-la lands, in their ivory towers, and they're infiltrating the political posts. I mean, Anne-Marie Slaughter, I think, is one of the worst examples I have. But believe me, my list is so long, I will be sitting here for hours and hours and hours. You can go on. War on Domestic Terrorism is my activism website. That was hacked in, and after throwing $1,000 at GoDaddy with promises to fix it, I put everything else up on WordPress Quenby. You can find it there. But this is another thing. People are sick and tired of going for a simple service, and they just want to sell. This digital age and techie liberalism that are driving us all frickin' crazy has to stop. The United States used to be top in customer service. When I moved abroad for the first time to England in 77, 78, everybody was just like, oh God, the Americans, nobody can touch us, including consumer service. Or, in service. Any kind of service. Even in the government service, as bad as it was. Because I was there 81 to 85 up on Capitol Hill working for a senator, and I got pretty disgusted, and that's why I left. I first came, with illusions of getting into public service, and I was all BS, this whole cesspool was going down. Then I opted into the financial markets. I was there for the 87 collapse. I said, oh Lord, you people are worse. So, I'm packing my bags. I need to recuperate and figure out what I'm going to do with my life. But I don't want to have anything to do with you people. Well, kind of jumped from the frying pan into the fire because the narcissism epidemic of the United States and all the cocaine snorting and the partying and the breakup of the family and the hedonism followed me abroad to Europe. And you're even seeing it, in South America. This is being exported. This whole American dream, dysfunctional paradigm is being, exported and embraced around the world. That's why you just see like with the World Bank, the IMF, the UN, all they are vehicles for the different factions of, you've got the empire builders, Russians, and of course they have their little allies. So you've got the Russians at the lead, the Chinese, all of the Asians, South Africans, Brazilians with South America, Indians, and then Europe and the U.S. and all. They're just vying for to be the new dominators of the world and empire builders. And this is why we're seeing so much extremism and violence. And they're all in bed with the corporate interests and the corporate greed and the corruption within their government agencies. And everything they're doing is just either window dressing and more propaganda. Our media outlets are owned by the corporations as well, and Wall Street. So that's, I have been, with all of the activists, we need to focus on getting to the media, and when, I think it was the Boston Globe that came out with the scandal, the sex scandal, the pedophile sex scandal with the Catholic Church, there was great hope amongst the family court activists that we would get the media to do something similar. It hasn't happened yet. All of I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible the amount of evidence that is out there of all of the different problems, not just in family courts. I started with family courts, but I've been, as I say, I was up on Capitol Hill. I've always been very implicated in politics, but not, party politics, in real politics. As I say, politics is affairs of the state, not extramarital affairs of the different people within the state government. It's just, all about backstabbing. This is one of the things that I keep on saying in Washington, D.C. Stop, denigrating me, insulting me, fat, ugly, stupid, get in line, you can go in. I heard that one so many times in my life from my ex-husband, my family. It doesn't bother me, because I know it's because you don't understand what I'm talking about, therefore you just want to insult me. Now, if you have an issue with anything that I am saying, tell me, and we can discuss it. I mean, the first debate, Biden won. I said nobody answered any questions. Like these things are just for show. So the media needs to be cleaned up along with the corporate greed, because they're all, which is also part of Wall Street. Now, which is in bed with the central banks. In the United States, we have the Fed. I mean, one of the things that I would be asking some serious questions about the Fed, how is it possible that you all just gave another $3 trillion, injected another $3 trillion into the banking systems? And I haven't even looked at the other central banks around the world. I can just imagine. See, this is what's keeping the stock market up. I mean, this is absolutely crazy that Trump would be saying, look, with COVID and the market is going up, what a great president I am. Any president with a brain would be like, wait, this makes no sense at all. I want to know what's going on here. But something's not right here in Denmark. And another thing, the Democrats saying that the economy has gone to shit because of Trump. No, be fair. We've had problems with the economy, and the economy shutting down because of the COVID. Don't point fingers where they shouldn't be pointed. In that, you should be pointing your finger over at the World Health Organization and say, I want an explanation of what's going on here. And they depend on the United Nations. So see, it is important that not only is the American government being held accountable, and everybody here, but the international organizations, because they should be overseeing all of this. And they are dropping the ball. Now, I have just about everybody in Washington. One of the ways that I would get rid of all of these people is I do have a very long list of people that I've basically set up. Everybody in Washington wants to play the Machiavellian game. Okay, well, we play hardball. So, you don't want to listen. You have an obligation to listen. You have an obligation under the law, so I'll take you to court. Now, just about everybody in Washington is looking at lawsuits under Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization Act and Foreign Corrupt Practices Act for covering everything up. That's another promise. Then I would be head of the American government, and yeah, I could use RICO, and I could use Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and I got it all set up. Anybody can see the Institute for Capacity Development, the IMF, and the World Bank. UN women, I haven't totally argued that, but that would be very, very easy. No problem. Another one who's implicated in that is all of the House Finance Committee under Maxine Waters. That includes Ocasio-Cortez. And in fact, she's up a creek without a paddle, because when I called her office and asked who was the staffer handling the issues under the purview, the IMF, because the House Finance Committee does oversee the IMF and the World Bank, I was told that they didn't have a staffer yet. And I said, well, I'll send you my resume along with the information. Never heard back. See, it's all a very, very closed. I've been told constantly, you opted out of the game and you missed the boat. And I keep on explaining to all of these HR people who won't even give me an interview for any of these organizations, even though I'm highly and uniquely qualified. Well, guess what? The little boat that you got on is a Titanic. And you're all going down. And I'm left at the docks holding the booty. The joke's on you. I mean, it's incredible. An American, a white American in the Capitol who is qualified to do any slew of jobs but can't get a job because she's white and she's competent and she's a hard worker and she's smart and she's honest. I mean, this town, Trump won because the swamp needs to be drained. So, all of those need to be attacked. I already went into education reform. And that, the universities are going to have to be held to account, because I got a whole slew of names of not only professors in these universities who should be getting their crap together. I mean, they're not just teaching kids anymore. They're end up policy making, all sorts of stuff to create more and more and more and more jobs for the PhDs who never graduated from kindergarten that have been, thrown into the market in the past 3-4 decades. It's ridiculous. Absolutely. And who's footing the bill for all of this? Taxpayers and shareholders. So the 90%ers, which I represent, and I'm calling out the 10%ers, of which, is my class. Yes, we do have a class structure in the United States. And it's right, quite frankly, disgusting how the 10%ers are only concerned with cashing in and sitting there in their $1 million homes, because believe me, $1 million home these days, no big deal. They want the $10 billion, $1 million homes, and the 10 million want the $1 billion. I mean, it just, and the thing is, the only difference between the poor people and the rich people of this world is the poor people have a car or a house or something like that they can't afford. And the rich people have a yacht or some mansions or some airplanes that they can't afford. This over-indebtedness, gotta grapple up the ladder of success, gotta keep up with the Joneses, urban luxury living, managerialism. Oh my lord, too many chefs spoil this soup is driving us all batty. That just has to end. And basically the three problems that I've identified, if you will, in my research, which has been an intersectional, basically I've been looking at all of the different social sciences, anthropology, economics, politics, political science, psychology, sociology, but what the experts are saying, but also what's happening on the ground. And looking at the big picture, which nobody else is doing. So the three problems are really managerialism. We need more workers and less frickin' managers who are sitting around on their smartphones. Alpha dominance feminism, and this goes to alpha dominance minorities, all of the different minorities, because the right wants dominance for the white male they want white male supremacy, where in the Muslim world it's brown male supremacy, of course, but they want male supremacy, and whereas the left, and Chris Hedges does a very good job in his book, The Death of the Liberal Class, the left have just become libertines. The Economist is, if you look at Bernard Mandeville, what Bernard Mandeville said. He was an economist about the time of Adam Smith. Adam Smith said that we had an invisible hand, and we do have an invisible hand. Just our invisible hand at the moment is a bunch of social climbing dumb blondes who want to go and get their nails done and massages and all of that, and hand their children over to the nannies, and that's the model that we're setting. And and Mandeville said, well, it doesn't matter what jobs we produce. Yeah, prostitutes, they produce jobs. Drug dealers, they produce jobs. They produce products. They keep the economy going. Casinos do as well, yeah. And all the whores and pimps in this town are producing a lot of jobs, yes. And they're producing a lot of economy, and the restaurants are making a lot of money off of it. And the retail outlets as well, they're thriving. Everybody's thriving. But the rest of the world is going to hell. So it does matter what jobs you produce. And this gets in, I support as well, the Green New Deal. And believe me, if any of you big wigs and egotistical idiots out there want to take me on and try and shame game me about the new Green Deal, like you did with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you got another thing coming. She may be a little girl from the Bronx, but I'm an old lady who's been around the block many times. And your blocks of the ruling elite in Northwest DC, in your expensive neighborhoods in Bogota, in Madrid, in Paris, in London, one of the problems with all of these rags to riches stories is everybody's impressed that they've arrived. Believe me, I arrived back here in the 80s. Yes, my mother was a social climber, and she primped and preened her daughters to be, socialites and know how to talk and to walk and to speak and to play the piano. Well, I never learned the piano. But to ride, art, all of the appreciation of music, all of those things, all of the trappings. But ladies, that's just the exterior. That doesn't have to define you. And yes, you have to set an example for other people, but you also have to set an example not just in how you dress and how you eat at the table, which I'm horrified when I sit in the restaurants these days watching the table manners of a lot of people in this town. It's also about having heart and having a brain and using that brain. See, that's one of the big differences with me, my siblings, and apparently most of the other people that I went to prep school with. I appreciated Foxcroft School and Cobham Hall because I had some teachers that said, "Lady, you got a brain, now use it. And don't be afraid to use it. And if anybody tells you that you don't know what you're talking about, you tell them to go and take a hike. Because, lady, hell, we've never seen anybody who can argue like you. I have to agree with your mom. You'd argue with God." And I would always respond to her, I would if he was wrong. And everybody in this town thinks they're God, but they're not. And I can chew them up and spit them out like that. So, yeah, I don't have any money. I don't have any fancy campaigns. I don't even have any fancy campaign office. I'm sitting here in renting a room in Washington, D.C. with my landlord trying to throw me out living on a tent because he doesn't like my politics. He was a lawyer in the family courts. He's retired now, so I think he's afraid of what might happen to him when the Nuremberg trials do begin. So, people, that's my platform. Whatever, I guess, if anybody wants to pencil me in, go ahead. Whatever happens when the elections, I promise you, I will once again, as I have continued, I've never retracted that. On the day after the 2016 elections, when Trump won, I called for a dissolution of the American government and a formation of a new government, because nobody in this town can rule. Nobody in this town knows what they're doing. So even in the very likely event that I do not get voted in as president, I promise you I will once again call for a dissolution of the American government. Even if they got me living on a tent on Pennsylvania Avenue, you'll see me. I'll have a banner out there that says Occupy Penn Avenue. Lucky I don't eat much. I'll get some sunflower seeds. That usually keeps the hunger at bay for me. And wait until the revolution begins. If people in Washington don't wake up, this is going to be a bloodbath. And nobody wants to listen to me. Believe me. I've knocked at doors. Gita Ravindra, the mediator at the IMF, the Institute for Capacity Development, who swept up all of the mismanagement problems in the IMF under the carpet, told me that my problem was that I'm not conciliatory enough. Look, I have been conciliatory my entire life. Even though when I usually stand up and say something, all of the 10%ers around go, oh Lord, what is she gonna say to the power elite? Because I don't mince words. A spade's a spade. Like with at the American Embassy in Bogota, yeah, I stood up when they did the presentation Plan Colombia and asked the idiot over the State Department, very well and good to get rid of the drug production here, but what about the, until you get rid of the consumption, it's just going to pop up elsewhere. State Department idiot said, what do you care, lady, as long as we get rid of it here? I shouldn't be standing up alone at these embassy functions asking what the hell the American government is doing. I should have every other woman in there standing up with me. So, please stay safe. Well, I'm all by myself, so I don't have a mask on. Maybe I should have done this with a mask. But these throwaway masks, I don't have money for that. I'm on unemployment. Restaurant shut down, and of course, they took back the immigrants, the illegal immigrants, but not the American. The owner doesn't want to take me in as the manager because I'd clean the place up. It's called Kellari, Kellari, Taverna, Taverna, in Washington, D.C. Look at the reviews, particularly the one on February 14th, Valentine's Day. The hostess shouting at the waiter. Me. Because somebody had to take control. I told the waiters afterward, I said, I felt like John Paul Jones. He's in my family tree. So is founding father John Dickinson, and I've done all of my argumentation really under paralleling John Dickinson. But John Paul Jones is also in my family tree. I'm trying to avoid the violence that he did not like the violence. But and I told the waiter, I said I felt like John Dickinson. I felt like John Paul Jones when the captain and first mate died at sea, and he was still a kid, and he had to get the ship back to port. And that's how he got his first commission. But at least with John Paul Jones, the captain and first mate had the good grace to die. I had the two managers. Oh, my Lord. I mean, I can't wait to get that case into court against the managers, against the owners on discrimination against me under labor rights violations, and start calling in all of the VIPs, because this is on K Street, to come in as my witnesses of what a catastrophe this place is. Now, why are all these lobbyists sitting up there with such catastrophe going on right at their feet? Also, they're eating in these places. They should be concerned about the hygiene rather than it is what it is. So anyway, for the COVID, I got these online. They're cotton, and the good thing about it is, if I'm walking around the street, I can do that, but because you do want to, it just has one layer, but I can double it and I can triple it easily. And I'm going to have to fold it a little bit better. But also, it keeps, because the other masks, you have the air that's coming out, because this, I have my, but this, you have the entire area, and you can pull it there, and it helps also keep the air. Because this is another thing. Every time I hear the media, I want to explode. Wearing masks does not protect you. Trump keeps on saying, yeah, but people are still getting sick wearing the masks. Of course. Because it does not protect you. It protects the society from you, if you have it, from transmitting it. This is no, I didn't get into the economic stimulus. If they've got $3 trillion for the banks, corrupt banks, they got 10-20 trillion for the people. And this is one of my big problems with the landlord right now, is that landlords, employers, everybody has just as much responsibility to make sure that the money is getting to the people, because not all of the money is getting there, as well as that the stimulus keeps on coming, because our economies have not collapsed. What has collapsed is the luxury, high-end, the yacht makers, the airplanes, all of the travel, which, the international community, all of those seminars and conferences is BS. They don't need that. The corporate travel, this was something that I said, years and years and years ago when I saw internet. You all don't have to fly around all over the world now to have your meetings. Sure, you want to get together and know each other, but you can do a lot online, and people are seeing that with the COVID. So there have been some positive consequences, social consequences with the COVID, and people are spending more time with their families. That's important. I mean, I am so sick and tired of everybody complaining in my entourage of, we can't jet set anymore. We can't go out to the restaurants. We just gotta hang out and hope, try and get some stimulus money. The corporations are getting the money. So until all of this is over and we can get back to normal, we cannot get back to normal. Normal was not good. So the stimulus money that needs to be, and that's another thing, you get me, and I promise you the stimulus money will be executive order and getting to the people. And all the bureaucrats, that will be cleaned up. As I keep on saying, give me 1,000 Patsy Guyers in this city. She was the executive assistant to former Senator Bennett Johnston, who I worked for from 81 to 85, and the most competent, hardworking, and respectable person I've ever met in this city. So, sorry, I forgot about the stimulus. So, yeah, so those are my promises. Do keep safe, keep your masks on. It is important for everyone to realize that you are part of a community. And as such, you have obligations to that community. Now, the higher up in the echelon that you get in terms of money and power, the greater your obligation becomes to serve the community, because you have more resources. And not just financial resources, educational resources as well. But everybody, from bottom to top, has a responsibility towards the community, as well as the community having a responsibility towards them. So please, stay safe, Take care of yourself and take care of those close to you and not so close to you. You see somebody who needs some help? Help them out. It's good for the soul. Makes you feel good. It's better than, I can promise you, it's a better adrenaline high than the adrenaline high all the psychopaths and narcissists are on who are ruling the world. So stay safe and have a nice day, and vote Quenby and Wilcox. God.